Walk with me through the halls of the Comic Kingdom. The Comet, the first superhero death in comics. When Superman died in late 1992, it made headlines in a big way. Clearly it was not going to be permanent, but we had to wait a year for him to come back, and all kinds of interesting things happened in the meantime. Since this did so well, it inspired the death and resurrection of a lot of superheroes. So much so that it quickly became a tired practice. Superman wasn't the first superhero to die in comics by a long shot. But who was the very first? His name was the Comet, and he was published by MLJ, the company that would later be known as Archie. The Comet's death was done, not as a way to draw interest to him, but to wipe him out and make way for an entirely different character. On a side note, Marvel ripped off the Comet on not one, but 3 different occasions. One of these attempts has been hugely successful. Keep watching the video to find out who. I promise you won't have to wait until the end. Pep Comics number 1. Pep Comics was a very important series to the medium of comic books, but it has gotten very little respect in the whole scheme of things. That's another story. The first issue was cover dated January 1940, meaning that it was actually released in late 1939. The leading feature was of a superhero called the Shield, who was the very first patriotic-themed American superhero. Timely's Captain America would not come out until over a year after the Shield. The Shield was a big character for MLJ, no doubt about it, and he stayed the lead feature of Pep for a while, until Archie took over. There were other great features in this issue, but the only one to hold a lasting impression for the publisher besides the Shield was the Comet, created by Jack Cole. MLJ initially had a lot of faith in the character, making him the second feature right after the Shield. Jack Cole. Jack Cole is best known as the creator of Plastic Man, which he did for Quality in 1941, and, in his later years, cartoon work for Playboy magazine. He did a lot of great stuff before and after Plastic Man, though, that is often overlooked. At Lev Gleason, he didn't create the Golden Age Daredevil, but retooled the character after his first appearance, making him the classic superhero people recognize today. At the same publisher, he created the fantastic Dickie Dean Boy Inventor series, not to mention all the great stuff he did before that for Chesler. He could draw cartoony or realistic, and often blended the two with a sense of humor. Plastic Man is the best showcase of what Jack could do. It might surprise you then that his comic character, although awesome, was pretty serious and not like much else he ever did. The Comet. The Comet's origin appeared in his first adventure. His real name was John Dickering. He was a scientist who discovered a gas 50 times lighter than hydrogen. He injected small doses of it into his bloodstream, allowing him to make great leaps through the air. After some more injections, twin beams came from his eyes. When he crossed the beams, whatever he looked at disintegrated. Glass was the only thing that wouldn't disintegrate by his eye lasers, so he made himself a glass visor. From the jump, he had a weakness. Believe it or not, a lot of hero characters in comics and cartoons, before and after the Comet, failed because they had no weaknesses. Odd enough, some kind of vulnerability is needed to move a character forward. So the Comet had an origin story, a weakness, and an awesome costume. He should have been set for superstardom, right? Well, it didn't work out that way. The Comet had a very casual attitude with violence. Jack Cole made a lot of his comics this way. People from the 1930s and 40s were made from a tougher stock anyway, and Jack Cole was no sissy. The Comet doesn't believe in taking prisoners, and disintegrates all the bad guys except the ringleader, who he drops from the sky to his death. Hey, they were dealing with germ warfare, so they get what they get. The Comet made his identity public. My question is, if he did that from the start, why would he have needed a costume? It's an awesome looking costume, but it seems unnecessary. It also seems that everyone knows his weakness. John Dickering made a lot of bad judgment calls. Then again, injecting himself with gas in the first place wasn't the best idea. The police actually liked the Comet in the beginning. They didn't want to arrest or kill him, but hire him for the police force. In the second story, the Comet was once again a brutal vigilante, killing his enemies. By Pep number 3, though, that dynamic changes. It turns out the criminal leader from number 2, called Satan, survived and wanted revenge. He kidnaps Comet, has a hypnotist named Zadar put him under a spell, and makes him commit crimes. Comet promptly kills a night watchman at a textile factory. The police are on him right away, in disbelief. Comet then kills 2 policemen with his eye lasers, and blows up a police car. The Comet's crime spree goes on for weeks, and no one but Satan's gang knows why. The police and the rest of the public think Comet has gone rogue. One day, under Zadar's command, Comet kills Satan. This is one of the most gruesome moments in his comics, as you actually see Satan melting instead of just going poof. The Comet then returns to Zadar, but forgetting to put his visor back on, blasts the evil hypnotist. It breaks the spell, and Comet returns to his senses, but it's a mixed blessing. Comet later finds out what happened to him, but is put in quite a spot. Both Satan and Zadar are no more. He can't just go to the police and tell them these guys made him do it. There aren't even bodies to prove they existed. The story ends with Comet vowing to clear his name or die in the attempt. Pep Comics number 3 ended up changing the whole trajectory of the character. He went from standard superhero to an outlaw superhero. I do not wish to use the term anti-hero for the Comet. When he wasn't being controlled, he had a moral compass and wouldn't kill just anyone or do just anything. He was now just a vigilante wanted by the police. I like Jack Cole, and I'm a fan of his work, but truth be told, I think he wrote himself into a corner he couldn't get out of. A good idea would have been if it was revealed that another person who had once worked for Satan came forward with a journal or film reels. Something that would have put the Comet in the clear. Damage control. From Pep Comics number 4 until his death in number 17, the Comet worked on repairing his bad reputation. After a number of days, he actually turned himself into the police and was promptly put in jail. This would have been fine, but an angry lynch mob with guns came to the jail and tried to kill him. The Comet broke out and is on the loose again. He barely escaped with his life and was later shot. An old miner nurses the Comet back to health, and after John tells him his story, becomes the first person to believe the fallen superhero. The Comet then takes on a crooked mine owner and his gang, helping out all the mine workers. In number 5, the Comet meets a woman who becomes a very important character. Her name is Thelma Gordon, and she is a newspaper reporter. She tracks him down and, having followed the Comet story for a long time, knows that he's innocent of the past crimes he committed. Thelma becomes his greatest ally and, later on, love interest. She works hard to clear his name and helps him solve crimes, reporting on all the good things he does. In number 6, Comet tries to help the families of the many killed while under hypnosis. He manages to redeem himself to Mrs. O'Hara, the widow of one of the patrolmen he killed. Issue number 7 gives us another weakness to the Comet. His gas injections wear off after time, so he needs to recharge. One thing he should have considered is that if his powers went away, including the deadly eye lasers, he could have altered his appearance and started a new life under a different name. That would have been a better end to the character than killing him off like they did later on down the road. In addition, he can gauge how long he wants to be the Comet by the size of the dose. The bigger the dose, the longer he has powers. Cool, eh? He still kills bad people with his eye lasers, but is a little more discriminating. One of the coolest bits yet is the fact that he can disintegrate bullets being shot at him. Oh, and for sure, Thelma Gordon is his woman. They go to eat at a fancy restaurant, but I'm a little perplexed. The Comet is still a wanted fugitive, and everyone knows John Dickering is the Comet. Did he somehow alter his appearance and we don't know about it? Pep Comics number 8. The Comet story in this issue may or may not have been done by Jack Cole. It is cover dated September 1940. After this, he was revamping the Daredevil character for the Lev Gleason publisher. There is a possibility that this story was done by a tryout artist. In my opinion, the art doesn't really match up to Jack Cole. Not that it's bad, it just doesn't look the same. At any rate, for sure, Jack Cole was out of it after this issue. This is actually a very good story, and I'm thinking by now, the police should start going a little easier on him. First of all, he always said his previous bad doings was due to being hypnotized. He turned himself in and only fled because a lynch mob was after him. He redeemed himself to the widow of one of the fallen officers, and I would think she would be publicly praising him. In the previous issue, he recovers the fantastic army plane, the Flying Juggernaut, from foreign agents. The U.S. Army even wanted to give him a congressional medal. In this issue, he saves a major city from electrical death rays. Still, John Dickering mentions at the end of this story that if the police ever recognized him as a civilian, they would gun him down in a second. He's a misunderstood hero, like the Hulk would be years later. The Bob Wood issues. By Pep Comics number 9, the Comet feature was taken over by artist Bob Wood and writer Abner Sundell. Both of these guys were very talented and worked very heavy with various publishers during the Golden Age. With Wood and Sundell at the helm, I really didn't notice much difference. The art was still decent, and the tone of the feature stayed the same. In the previous issue, a madman held the city for ransom using electrical death rays. In this issue, it's the same basic thing, but with a device that creates earthquakes. The Comet comics were always cool for the fact that there were always odd little things going on that you hadn't seen before in previous stories. In this one, ransom money was put into iron trunks, which would then float away to the bad guys. And once again, the Comet is blasting bad guys as well as their plane and getaway truck. If this sounds extreme, you've got to keep in mind that the bad guys the Comet targets are violent criminals who kill people. They're not harmless cat burglars or embezzlers. The bad guys in these stories are playing a violent game and care nothing about the people they hurt. Sundell was out as the writer in number 10, with Joe Blair stepping in. I will say that with the ever-changing lineup since Jack Cole, they managed to keep it looking and reading like the Comet was supposed to. In this story, an arsonist is setting fires to oil wells. The Comet, with Thelma Gordon, has to find out why and stop it. This time around, the Comet doesn't use his eye lasers on anyone directly. It is also noteworthy that John Dickering and Thelma Gordon are definitely still an item, vacationing together out in the country when the trouble starts. The Joe Blair, Lynn Streeter era. By number 11, though, the team was changed entirely to Joe Blair as writer and Lynn Streeter as the artist. The art is different. Not bad, just different. The premise of the Comet is the same, but over time, Blair and Streeter added a number of new things to the Comet saga. His main thing was going after criminal masterminds. He didn't go after petty crooks. In this adventure, he goes after a sabotage gang. It's the first time the Comet had a multi-part adventure. This was the first indicator that stress cracks were forming with the Comet feature. I don't know if they felt the Comet wasn't popular with readers, so they had to do something to draw them to the next issue, or if the people at MLJ were just getting tired of him. At any rate, the decline was starting to show. Pep Comics number 12. This is the first time the Comet was not the second feature in the series. It had always come right behind the Shield, the leading feature. In this issue, the second feature was Danny in Wonderland. It was a brand new feature meant to draw in younger readers. I actually like this one too, so I can't trash on it. But the Comet did get pushed back to third feature. Other than that, Blair and Streeter were back with the Comet, and it concluded the story with the sabotage gang. Two notable things happen here. This is the first time the Comet's injections wore off during the middle of a job. He had to bluff his way out of being killed. Also, this is the first time a policeman showed him any leniency since he accidentally killed those cops way back in number 3. It seems like he was starting to redeem himself with some of the police. The end of the story promised newer and more exciting adventures beginning with the next issue, so it's very obvious MLJ felt there was a problem with the Comet. Personally, I thought it was as good as ever. The Comet was a cool feature. Pep Comics number 13. Once again, Danny is in the number 2 spot, and Comet is number 3. This Comet story is different than his previous adventures. It's the first time he doesn't go after a really bad guy. A negligent owner of tenement buildings is allowing his buildings to collapse. He's not evil per se, just money-minded, and doesn't care about the safety of others. Comet puts the owner in an unsafe situation so he knows what it feels like. The man genuinely has a change of heart and reforms to do something better for the people who have lived in his buildings. This story proves that the Comet isn't some bloodthirsty nut in a costume who just wants to kill bad guys. I think Blair and Streeter were making him into more of a human being. Pep Comics number 14. The Comet goes up against a crooked eye surgeon. It's the second time he ran out of gas during the mission, and he gets knocked out. This is the first time that Thelma actually saves the Comet when she shoots the doctor. My only problem with the Comet stories is when they seem to forget the police are still after him. I don't think John Dickering would be going to a fancy restaurant like he did in number 7, or a fancy party like he did in this issue. I also don't think it would be a good idea for Thelma to be calling him John in public. Even more strange, John has a car accident at the beginning of the story, and a cop approaches him, but doesn't recognize him. The Comet being on the run from the police is a detail that the writers seem to trip out too frequently. It needed to be resolved, because it was just getting in the way. Pep Comics number 15. This is another good story. It's a lot like the negligent landlord story from number 13, but a little bit different because the man responsible is not a good person and can't be redeemed. While in a watch factory on an assignment, Thelma is caught in a machine and almost killed. One of the female workers saves her life, but is electrocuted in the process. The girl is about to die when it's discovered that the shock wasn't her main problem. She was dying of radium poisoning. The Comet quickly brings the only doctor who could cure the girl. Once she's taken care of, the girl states that all the female workers are suffering from the same sickness. She wanted all of them to be cured, but it would have been too expensive. The Comet finds out that the owner was indeed knowledgeable of the radium poisoning in his factory and forced him to pay for the girl's treatment, or he would face a murder charge. The girls are all saved. This is the first time we see John and Thelma kiss. We know that they had to do at least that much before this story, but it's the first time we see it. I always did think Thelma was a good addition to the Comet saga as a sidekick and love interest. I really don't think he could have lasted as long as he did without her. Pep Comics number 16. This was simply another sabotage story, this time involving skyscrapers. The big difference is that he spends much of the story doing super stuff out of costume. It's the first time this happened. The end of the story gives a sort of heads up about the next issue, but I don't think anyone figured it was going to go where it did. It simply said, "Prison bars or the grave. What fate does the Comet meet when he faces retribution?" Don't miss the Comet in next month's Pep Comics. The Death of the Comet. It happened in Pep Comics number 17, cover dated July 1941, and quietly made comic book history. The cover has S.H.I.E.L.D. and his sidekick, Dusty, introducing a new superhero called the Hangman. Oh, that's nice. But little did anyone suspect that an existing character was going to be sacrificed to make room for him. The Hangman is the second feature of this issue, moving Danny in Wonderland to the number 3 spot. It starts off with the Comet turning a gangster over to the police. He claims that John Dickering helped him catch the gangster, and that he would testify in court. Wait a minute, it had already been established that John's identity was public knowledge. This was a goof. Joe Blair and Lynn Streeter were no longer at the helm. A man by the name of Cliff Campbell was the writer. This is known to be a pen name of Abner Sundell, although some people think it could have been Harry Shorten. George Storm was now the artist. I don't want to be mean, but this whole story was a stupid way to write out the Comet. It breaks continuity all over the place. Thelma is upset because she wants John to give up being the Comet. She wants them to get married, but John wants to put duty first to make amends for accidentally killing those cops all those issues ago. John's younger brother, Bob, who we never heard about before, catches him dressing up as the Comet and is surprised. He never could have guessed his brother was the Comet. Well, wasn't that known by everyone? The Comet is so busy that he has his brother take his girlfriend out for the next few weeks while he takes care of business. Dumb. It's made clear that John has been neglecting Thelma and that he is lacking the social qualities Bob possesses. This doesn't at all seem to match up with John and Thelma's relationship in previous adventures. Big Boy Malone, the head of the mob, wanted John Dickering terminated before he could testify. Bob is mistakenly taken by the goons, and the Comet goes after them. He takes the bullets that were meant for Bob and is fatally wounded. Bob brings the Comet back to his lab, but the mighty hero dies. On his deathbed, Comet says that Bob and Thelma should stay together as a sort of memorial to him. I must say, Comet has been pretty generous to his brother with his girlfriend. The next page is a pretty lousy origin. Okay, Thelma, I'm going to be the hangman now after I find a uniform. He goes to the trial that John was supposed to go to, takes the criminal that was supposed to be on trial, and freaks him out into admitting that he was a killer. How? By using a flashlight to project an image of a hangman's gallows. Of course. Hey, it will also work on all other criminals too. Well, Big Boy Malone was arrested and hanged by the authorities, and the hangman avenged his brother. Once again, this is probably the stupidest write-out of a superhero I've ever seen, and in the last panel, you can see how proud they were of themselves. The Hangman. My feelings on the Hangman? I liked his comics, but he was not as good of a character as the Comet. Not at all. He didn't have any superpowers. He didn't even have all that good of a costume. The Hangman didn't necessarily hang any of his enemies. He flashed the image of a gallows, and a number of times the criminal would do something stupid to accidentally hang themselves, or they would be executed by the law. The Hangman was really just a brawler. It would have made more sense if he actually hanged all the violent criminals he encountered. The Comet wasn't really mentioned again outside of the Hangman's first appearance. That's how disposable MLJ felt the character was. The more discouraging part is that the Hangman got so much more popular than the Comet, at least for a while. MLJ gave the Hangman a heck of a push. He appeared on covers of Pep Comics immediately alongside the Shield. He stayed with the series through number 47. In very late 1941, cover dated January 1942, the Hangman was given his own series. The first issue was titled Special Comics, but by number 2, it was called Hangman Comics. It lasted under this title through number 8 until it was renamed Black Hood Comics after an even more popular superhero. Hangman stayed a backing feature until his last Golden Age appearance in Black Hood Comics number 10, cover dated April 1944. He lasted almost 3 years, where Big Brother Comet lasted about a year and a half. How did Marvel rip off the Comet? As I mentioned earlier in the video, Marvel did take certain liberties when it came to the classic Golden Age version of the Comet. This was not at all an isolated incident. Stan Lee and the boys ripped off a lot of Golden Age characters to create their new groundbreaking heroes that greatly rocked the Silver Age. The X-Men number 1, cover dated September 1963, featured a team of characters who, although overseen by its founder Professor Charles Xavier, is led by Cyclops. The basic idea of Cyclops, and especially his original design, were lifted from MLJ's The Comet. A superhero who can shoot lasers from his eyes, but can't control them without the use of a special visor. How unique and original, eh? Credit for the creation of Cyclops is given to writer Stan Lee and artist Jack Kirby. By this time, the Comet's creator Jack Cole was dead. He took his own life in 1958. The Comet had been out of use since 1941. The Archie publisher was still around though, so Stan and Jack didn't want to get too frisky with ripping off the character. It did, however, prompt Archie to start doing something with the Comet again. Cyclops wasn't the only time Marvel was inspired by the Comet. They did it again in the 1970s and again in the 1980s. I will get to those guys in a little bit. The Comet returns. MLJ, now called Archie Comics, brought back the Comet in 1964, 23 years later, basically to maintain copyright. For sure, after this, no one else was going to be able to have a superhero called the Comet, or copy him too directly. Superheroes were also becoming hip again, thanks to DC and Marvel, and Archie had quite a lot of them in their stable. The Comet had a new costume and extraterrestrial origins. He had to have a new costume, because if he went by his old one, it would be like he was ripping off Marvel's Cyclops. Isn't it funny how that works? How can we describe Comet's look from the 1960s? Well, to me, he looks like a cross between Frank Buck and Buck Rogers, with possibly some inspiration from Prince Baron of the Flash Gordon comics. It's not really a great look. He didn't have a visor, and really, he didn't share the previous Comet's backstory. But Archie claimed they were one and the same. Comet was made the temporary love interest of Fly Girl in Adventures of the Fly number 30, cover dated October 1964. The series was retitled Flyman with number 31, and in it, this new version of the Comet becomes a member of the Mighty Crusaders team. When the Mighty Crusaders got their own title, Comet's origin was repeated, retconned, and expanded upon with their second issue in 1966. He was now John Dickering again, and somehow he had become the king of an alien planet. The Mighty Crusaders lasted just 7 issues before being canceled later that year. Thus endeth Comet's second run. Marv Wolfman's The Comet. In 1978, Marvel Comics ripped off the Comet again. This time they were a bit more bold. They actually called this superhero the Comet. He first appeared in Nova number 21, cover dated June 1978, in his civilian identity as Harris Moore, and in the following issue as his superhero identity. Created by writer Marv Wolfman and artist John Buscema, this was a pretty bold stunt. This Comet was also a greatly tragic hero who was once beloved by the public. He did keep his identity a secret, though. It's when one of his enemies discovered his identity that a hit was put out on him, killing his wife and one of his children. For a while, the Comet didn't know that one of his children survived. The Comet's son, named Frank Moore, likewise believed his father to be dead. He would later become the crime fighter, the Crime Buster. A different kind of twist on MLJ Comet's brother becoming the Hangman. For years, the Comet was out of action, and most people thought he had died. He became a terrible drunk. He gave up being the Comet, and actively gave up his powers. He was found and taken to a hospital one day, where X-rays revived his powers, and he once again, unwillingly, became the Comet. His first post-retirement job was rescuing Nova, the hero of the title, and they became buddies. To make a long story short, Crime Buster and Comet found each other and reconnected. I think this Comet was meant to become a bigger character, but it didn't work out. He appeared in Nova issues number 21 through 25. After that, he was in Fantastic Four number 206, 208, 209, and 217, with the last being published in late 1979. This was his heyday. He was mentioned as having been killed in the Avengers number 260, cover dated July 1985. He was later referenced in the 1993 series of Nova, issue number 1. There were some big differences between this Comet and MLJ's Comet. Besides the costume design, his energy blast came from his hands instead of his eyes. He did, however, fly around with a jet trail behind him. He was also a superhero who started out earthbound and eventually got into extraterrestrial adventures, like Archie's did in the 1960s. The saga of Marvel's Comet, and the character himself, are quite a bit more elaborate, and I don't even mind some of the similarities the two characters share. But calling him the Comet was a weak move. I'd be interested in knowing if the Archie publisher threatened legal action against Marvel, squashing this character. His run was certainly brief enough to indicate that. The Comet returns again. Archie tried, again, to bring back their superheroes with the Red Circle imprint. In 1983, the Comet got his very own self-titled series for the first time. It was supposed to be 6 issues, but lasted only 2. But hey, at least he had his original costume design in this one. Archie must have felt safe in being able to use it again. The Comet series from 1983 is a bit gritty. They were trying to make this too adult. He was always a serious superhero anyway, but he was a bit more fun in the 1940s and 60s. His origin story was told through flashback. It actually explains that he survived the bullets from Big Boy Malone's mob, his visit to the planet Ultrox, and his marriage to Queen Naja. Thelma Gordon ended up marrying Comet's brother Bob, the Hangman, when she believed the Comet was dead. They had a son named Steven. As this miniseries goes, Bob Dickering lays dying in a hospital. After he dies, Steven takes the Hangman costume and becomes the new Hangman. Why did this flop? The biggest reason is that it was a downer. Child abuse is a main focus in these 2 issues. We meet little Timmy Carpenter, who is being abused by his mother, and find out that Bob Dickering, the Hangman, abused his own son in order to make him stronger. Wow! And we thought Bob was such a great guy. Bill Dubay was the writer and Carmine Infantino was the artist. The writing and art was good. I'm not going to knock that. In a lot of ways, the writing tied things together better than they were in the 1940s and 60s. Dubay paid attention to things that happened in the old Pep comics, while rewriting some other details. In this particular case, though, since Archie was bringing back their characters after a long absence, I think they should have just started them all over and ignored the complicated continuity of the past. The Archie publisher has never had very good luck with their superheroes since the Golden Age ended. I actually like their superhero comics, but they've had a hard time since after the 1940s. Marvel's Comet Man. In 1987, Marvel came out with a character called Comet Man. He debuted in his own 6-issue limited series. It was originally planned to bring Comet Man into the mainstream Marvel universe after the series wrapped, but it didn't come to pass. It sounds like Comet Man would be a really bold ripoff of the Comet, but he was actually pretty different besides the name of the character and the fact that he could fly around with a trail behind him. Even the costume was radically different. Comet Man was created by actors Bill Mumy, Miguel Ferrer, and artist Kelly Jones. He was intentionally made to be a throwback to the Golden Age. The miniseries featured appearances from the Hulk, Captain America, and the Fantastic Four, but unfortunately it didn't take. The character appeared again in Fantastic Four, number 315 to 317, and again in Marvel Comics Presents, number 50 to 53. Since then, Comet Man has made small appearances in 2000 and 2007 in a couple of Marvel comics, but he remains an obscure character. The Comet returns yet again. Kinda. In the early 1990s, Archie licensed out their superhero characters to DC Comics for their new imprint, Impact Comics. This time around, DC was given free rein on their characters, and they reinvented them in some pretty interesting ways. I actually liked the Impact Comics imprint, and felt it deserved more of a shake than it got. It started in 1991, and was ended in 1993. Odd enough, the Comet, who was a neglected superhero character from Archie, and never even had his own series until 1983, albeit short-lived, had the longest running title of any Impact series with 18 issues and 1 annual. He was also in the Crusaders title, a rebranding of the Mighty Crusaders, for its 8-issue run. After both of those series ended, he was a major character in the 6-issue miniseries of The Crucible. This last series was meant to reboot the line, and a new Comet series would have come out, but Impact folded. Still, this was the most attention the Comet had ever been given in comic books. The Impact Comics version of the Comet is radically different from the previous versions. His costume kind of resembles the old Comet, but that's about it. His real name is Rob Connors, and his origin story and subsequent saga is entirely different, although with a few nods to the Golden Age Comet and a clever one to creator Jack Cole. Later on, Rob becomes a professional baseball player under the name of J. Cole. If you haven't read the Impact Comics titles, I recommend them. I also like their takes on the Black Hood and the Jaguar. The Comet in the 21st Century. Well, if you didn't already know, the comic book industry today is pretty desperate. Characters have been rehashed and rebooted countless times over. It just doesn't seem like the industry can come up with anything new that really hits big. Oh, I have my thoughts on why, but I don't like to be mean, and that's not what this video is about. DC decided to do Archie's superhero characters again in 2008. The Red Circle line folded again in late 2010. Yes, the Comet was there. He made his first DC appearance in The Shield number 5, cover dated March 2010. Appeared in the next issue, the Mighty Crusaders special, and The Web number 10, all in the same year. In 2012, the Archie publisher took control of their superhero properties again and relaunched Red Circle Comics as a totally digital imprint. It lasted until 2014 and was brought back early the next year as Dark Circle Comics, with the past continuity removed and in an actual print format, with some digital releases. This lasted until 2017. After that, they sat on their superheroes until 2021, and have dabbled with them on and off since then. In 2012, the Comet was a central character of the new Crusaders title. He was Greg Dickering, the adopted son of John Dickering. In 2015, he appeared in the one-shot New Crusaders Dark Tomorrow number 1. The state of Archie superheroes, including the Comet, is pretty sad. They've been messed around with a lot, and they need to have much longer periods of activity than they've had. I would like to see the Comet, and I mean the classic John Dickering version of the Comet, get his due. Forget all that crazy crap with Dyne, the Hangman, and the aliens. It needs to be the Comet and Thelma Gordon taking on bad guys without the wanted fugitive angle. He could be made into a pretty awesome movie. The Comet is a much more important and interesting character than he is given credit for. For being a fantastic superhero, a creation of the legendary Jack Cole, and his relevance in being the first superhero to die in comics, the Comet has earned his place flying the skies of the Comic Kingdom.